A quiet suburban home, dishes clinking faintly in the background, a television murmuring somewhere far away, and a man speaking calmly. "I don't think I'm alone in my house." There's something unsettling about the way he says it. Not fear, not panic, just certainty. The man's name was Daniel Hargrove, 32 years old. No criminal record, no history of mental illness. Worked a stable job in it. The kind of person you would describe as normal. Completely forgettable. Until that night. According to the report, Daniel had installed a small audio recorder in his home. Not for security, not for paranoia, but because of something much simpler and far more disturbing. He kept hearing things. Not loud noises, not footsteps, nothing obvious, just subtle inconsistencies. A chair slightly out of place, a door that he was sure he had closed, now open. A glass on the counter moved just a few inches. At first he blamed himself, like anyone would. Maybe he forgot. Maybe he was tired. Maybe it was nothing. But then it escalated. One night he came home from work and noticed something strange. The hallway light was on. He always turned it off before leaving. Always. He stood there for a long time, just staring at it, trying to remember, trying to convince himself that he had simply made a mistake. But something in his chest tightened. That quiet, instinctive feeling that something wasn't right. That's when he bought the recorder. He placed it in the center of his living room, turned it on, and left it running overnight. What he captured is what you're about to hear. At first, there's nothing, just silence. Occasionally, the faint hum of electricity, the distant ticking of a clock. Hours pass. Nothing happens. And then, at exactly *2:17 a.m., there's a sound. Not a loud one. Barely noticeable. A soft creak, like a floorboard bending under weight. Then another. Closer this time. Daniel wasn't home. He had stayed the night at a friend's place, which means whatever made that sound was inside the house alone. The recording continues. Slow, methodical sounds. Not random. Not accidental. Footsteps. Moving through the living room. Pausing. Then continuing. There's a moment, about 30 seconds in, where everything goes completely silent again. As if whatever it was had stopped moving. And then you hear it. A breath. Not loud. Not aggressive. Just there. Close to the recorder. Too close. Followed by something that investigators still haven't been able to explain. A whisper, but not in words. It sounds like someone trying to speak, without knowing how. Distorted. Broken. Almost learning. Daniel didn't listen to the full recording that night. He couldn't, because when he returned home the next morning, he noticed something else. The recorder wasn't where he left it. It had been moved, just slightly, but enough to confirm what he already feared. Something had touched it. That's when Daniel did something unusual. Instead of calling the police, he called a friend. Not just any friend, someone who worked in sound engineering. He wanted the recording analyzed, enhanced, cleaned up. He needed to know what he had captured, but what his friend found only made things worse, because buried beneath the static, beneath the faint hum of the house, There was something else. Another layer of audio. So quiet, you wouldn't notice it unless you were looking for it. And when they isolated it, slowed it down, and played it back clearly, it revealed something impossible. A voice, Daniel's voice, speaking at the same time as the whisper. But here the problem. The words didn't match. The whisper was mimicking him, trying to copy the way he spoke, repeating fragments, broken syllables, half-formed sentences, like something, learning how to be him. At this point, most people would leave, call the police, stay somewhere else, never come back. Daniel didn't. Instead, he stayed because he needed to know something. Was it still there? That night, he didn't use the recorder. He stayed awake, sitting in the dark, waiting. Hours passed. Nothing happened. The house remained silent, still, empty, until he heard it. From the hallway, a sound he recognized instantly. His own voice, calling his name from outside his bedroom door. Soft, calm, almost inviting. Daniel. He froze because he hadn't spoken, and there was no one else in the house. The voice came again, closer this time. Daniel opened the door. There's something deeply wrong about hearing yourself from somewhere you're not. Every instinct in his body told him not to move, not to respond, not to open that door. So he didn't. And after what felt like hours, the voice stopped. Completely. Gone. The next morning, Daniel packed a bag, left the house, and never returned. But that's not where the story ends. Because 3 weeks later, the house was sold. New owners, a family of 4. And for a while, everything was normal. Until the youngest child, a 6-year-old boy, told his mother something strange. That sometimes, late at night, he could hear someone calling his name from the hallway in a voice that sounded almost exactly like his own. And that's when investigators reopened the file, because Daniel's case wasn't the first, and it wouldn't be the last. Somewhere, in multiple homes, across different states, people were reporting the same thing. Not shadows, not figures, not footsteps, but something far more disturbing. Something that didn't just watch. It learned, it listened, and eventually, it spoke. When investigators reopened Daniel Hargrove's file, they weren't looking for ghosts. They weren't looking for intruders. They weren't even looking for answers. They were looking for *** patterns**. Because in cases like this, the details matter. Not the fear, not the reactions, but the small, almost invisible consistencies that hide beneath the surface. And Daniel's case had one detail that didn't belong: the mimicry. At first glance, it sounded like a glitch, audio distortion, a trick of overlapping frequencies. But when they compared his recording to other unrelated reports filed over the years, they found something impossible. The same behavior, different houses, different people, different states, but always the same sequence. 1. Subtle disturbances. 2. Unexplained movement. 3. Noises at night. 4. A presence that listens. 5. And finally, a voice. Not just any voice. Your voice. The file that changed everything was labeled. Case 2, the call that wasn't made. It came from a small town. Quiet. The kind of place where nothing ever really happens. The subject was a woman named Leila Carter, 28 years old, elementary school teacher, lived alone. Her story didn't begin with fear. It began with a phone call. At exactly *1:43 m***, Leila received a call from an unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something about it felt urgent. So she picked up. Hello. Silence. Not the kind of silence you get from a bad connection. Not static. Not interference. Just empty. She pulled the phone away from her ear. Checked the screen. The call was still active. That's when she heard it. A faint sound. Breathing. Slow. Controlled. Someone was on the line. Hello, she repeated louder this time. And then, the call ended. Just like that. No response. No explanation. Most people would ignore it. Block the number. Go back to sleep. Leila didn't. Because something about that breathing felt familiar. She couldn't explain it. Not logically. But it didn't feel like a stranger. It felt like recognition. The next day, she checked her call history. The number wasn't there. Not missed. Not received. Gone. As if it had never happened. That's when things started to shift. Small things at first. Her kitchen cabinet left open. The TV turning on by itself. Her bedroom door slightly ajar when she was sure she had closed it. The same pattern. But Leila didn't know that yet. She thought she was just stressed. Until the second call. This time it came earlier. 11:16 p.m. Again, unknown number. Again she answered. But this time, there was no silence. There was a voice. Soft. Barely audible. Hello. Leila froze. Because she recognized it instantly. It was her voice. Not similar. Not close. Exact. Same tone. Same cadence. Same breath between words. Like a perfect recording. Her heart started pounding. Who is this? She demanded. The voice repeated her question. Who is this? But slightly delayed. Slightly distorted. Like something was trying to keep up. She hung up immediately. Hands shaking. The kind of fear that doesn't come from danger, but from something deeper. Something that doesn't make sense. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat in her living room. Lights on. TV playing. Trying to drown out the silence. But silence has a way of finding you. Even in noise. Around 2:00 a.m. The power went out. Everything. Gone. The TV. The lights. The soft hum of electricity. All replaced by darkness. And in that darkness, her phone rang. This time, she didn't want to answer. But she did. Slowly lifting it to her ear. And before she could speak, the voice said something new. I'm inside. Her blood ran cold. Because this time, it didn't sound like her. It sounded closer, real. She dropped the phone, and in the silence that followed, she heard something else. From somewhere in her apartment. A movement. Soft. Deliberate. A footstep. Then another. Not from outside. From inside. Leela ran straight to the front door, unlocked it, and didn't stop until she was outside. Neighbors later reported seeing her barefoot in the street, crying, unable to speak. Police searched the apartment. Nothing. No signs of forced entry. No fingerprints. No evidence. Except for one thing. Her phone, still lying on the floor. The call still active. And when officers listened closely, they heard it. Breathing, followed by a whisper. Not Leela's voice, but something trying, very hard, to sound human. By the time investigators connected Leela's case to Daniel, a pattern had already begun to form, but they still didn't understand it. Until Case 3, the one that made everything worse. Case 3, the delay asterisk. This one didn't involve voices. At least, not at first. It involved time. A man named Victor Hale, security guard, night shift. His job was simple. Monitor cameras, walk the building every hour, report anything unusual. Routine, predictable, safe, until he noticed something strange. A delay, not in the system, not in the cameras, but in reality. Victor first saw it at 3:12 a.m. He was watching the main hallway feed. Empty, still, and then he saw himself on the screen, walking down the hallway. But here the problem. He hadn't left the security room yet. He was still sitting in his chair, watching as the version of him on the monitor walked past the camera and disappeared around the corner. Victor didn't move, didn't breathe, because deep down, he already knew that shouldn't be possible. Slowly, he stood up, heart racing, and stepped into the hallway, following the exact path he had just seen on the screen. Every step felt wrong, like he was retracing something that had already happened. Or worse, something that was about to. He reached the corner, paused, and turned. Nothing. The hallway was empty. Completely. Victor laughed nervously, tried to shake it off. Just a glitch, he muttered. But deep down, he didn't believe that. Because when he returned to the security room, the footage had changed. Now it showed him, standing at the corner, staring directly into the camera. But he had never done that. He never looked at the camera. And yet, there he was, on the screen, watching himself, smiling. That's when the audio kicked in, a feature that had never worked before. Until that moment. And through the speakers, Victor heard something that would haunt him forever. His own voice, saying something he had never said. I can see you now. By the time authorities stepped in, Victor had already quit, refused to return. But the building didn't stay empty. New guards were hired, new systems installed, and within weeks, the reports started again. Because whatever this was, it didn't stay in one place. It didn't belong to one person. It moved, adapted, observed, and most disturbingly of all, it learned. Investigators began calling it something unofficial. Not a ghost, not a person, but a phenomenon, a behavior. They called it the echo, because it didn't create. It repeated, it copied, it studied, and over time, It got better, but the most disturbing part, it didn't just mimic voices. It didn't just copy actions. It didn't just replay movements. It waited for the perfect moment to replace them. By the time investigators gave it a name, it was already too late. The echo, it sounded harmless, almost scientific, but there was nothing harmless about what they were dealing with. Because up until now, every case had followed the same pattern. It watched, it listened, it learned, it mimicked. But case 4 was the first time. It did something different. It didn't just copy. It acted asterisk. The file was marked. Case 4, the second return asterisk. The subject, a university student named Aaron Malik, 21 years old, lived in a shared apartment with 2 roommates. His story didn't begin with fear. It began with something almost forgettable, a moment that at the time didn't seem important. Aaron was returning home late one night, around 12:30 a.m. The streets were quiet, empty, the kind of silence that makes your footsteps feel louder than they should. As he approached his building, he noticed something strange. The front door was slightly open. That wasn't unusual. People in the building were careless. But as he stepped inside, he felt it. That subtle shift, like walking into a place that felt off. The hallway lights flickered slightly. The air felt colder, still, and then he saw him, standing at the end of the hallway. A man, facing away from him, wearing the exact same clothes, same jacket, same backpack, same posture. Aaron froze, because he wasn't looking at a stranger. He was looking at himself. The figure didn't move, didn't react, just stood there, perfectly still. Aaron blinked, and in that split second, the hallway was empty. The figure was gone. Just like that. No footsteps. No sound. Nothing. Now most people would run. Call someone. Leave. Aaron didn't. Because his brain did what most human brains do in moments like this. It rationalized. You're tired. You imagined it. It was a trick of the light. So he walked to his apartment, unlocked the door, stepped inside, and everything seemed normal. His roommates were asleep. The lights were off. The familiar comfort of home settled around him. But something followed him inside. Not physically. Something else. A feeling that he wasn't alone anymore. The first real sign came the next morning. Aaron woke up late. His alarm hadn't gone off. That annoyed him. He grabbed his phone to check it. And that's when he saw something strange. There was a video, recorded at 3:08 a.m. He didn't remember recording anything. Still half asleep, he tapped it. The footage was shaky, dark, but as his eyes adjusted, he felt his chest tighten, because the camera was pointed at his own bed. And in that bed, he was sleeping, peacefully, completely unaware. Aaron stopped breathing, because if he was in the bed, then who was holding the phone? The video continued. Slowly, the camera moved closer, step by step, until it was standing right beside him, watching him sleep. The sound of breathing filled the recording. Not heavy, not aggressive, just present. And then, the video ended. Aaron dropped the phone, his mind scrambling to catch up. This wasn't possible. There had to be an explanation. There had to be. But deep down, he already knew. That same feeling from the hallway. It hadn't left. That night, Aaron didn't sleep. He couldn't. He sat upright in his bed. Lights on. Door locked. Watching. Waiting. Hours passed. Nothing happened. Until around 2:00 a.m. That's when he heard it. From the living room. The sound of movement. Slow. Careful. Like someone trying not to be heard. Aaron's heart started pounding. His roommates were still asleep. He could hear them breathing through the walls. Which meant, whatever was in the living room wasn't them. He grabbed the nearest thing he could find. A metal lamp. And slowly, he opened his bedroom door. The hallway was dark. Silent. But the living room light was on. He stepped forward, each step heavier than the last. And as he reached the doorway, he saw it, standing in the middle of the room, looking at him. It was him. Not similar. Not close. Perfect. Same face. Same expression. Same everything. But there was one difference. The eyes. They didn't look human. Not empty. Not glowing. Just wrong. Like something wearing a face. It didn't fully understand. Aaron couldn't move. Because in that moment, every instinct in his body was screaming one thing. That is not you. The thing tilted its head slightly, studying him, observing, and then it smiled, a slow, unnatural smile, and spoke, in his voice. I got it right this time. Aaron ran. Didn't think. Didn't hesitate. He ran out of the apartment, down the stairs, into the street. He didn't stop until he reached the police station. Barefoot, shaking, unable to explain what he had seen. Officers searched the apartment. Nothing. No signs of forced entry. No evidence. No intruder. His roommates, still asleep. They claimed they hadn't heard anything, hadn't seen anyone. But when investigators checked Aaron's phone, the video was gone. Completely. Deleted. As if it had never existed. Aaron never went back. He dropped out of university, moved to another city, changed his number. But according to follow-up reports, the phenomenon didn't stop. Because weeks later, Aaron's roommate reported something strange. He claimed that one night, he saw Aaron standing in the apartment, watching him sleep. But when he sat up, no one was there. By now, the pattern was undeniable. This wasn't random. This wasn't isolated. And it definitely wasn't human. Because whatever the echo was, it wasn't just copying anymore. It was improving, learning faster, adapting better, getting closer, closer to something terrifying. Perfection. But the most disturbing discovery came shortly after, when investigators revisited old cases and noticed something they had missed before. In every single report, there was a moment, a brief, almost insignificant detail, where the person experienced something strange. And then, time passed. Normal life resumed. Nothing happened. Until, weeks later, the real event began, which meant one thing. The echo didn't act immediately. It waited, studied, prepared, and when the time was right, it didn't just appear, it replaced. By now, there was no denying it anymore. This wasn't a series of isolated incidents. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't coincidence. This was a process, a system, something with stages. Investigators began mapping every known case, every report, every recording, every survivor. And for the first time, a timeline emerged. It always began the same way. Stage 1 awareness. Small inconsistencies. Objects moving. Subtle shifts in reality. Stage 2 observation. Noises. Presence. Something listening. Stage 3 mimicry. Voices. Movements. Behavior. Stage 4 manifestation. Physical appearance. Direct interaction. And then, there was a stage they couldn't fully understand, because no one had ever truly come back from it. They called it Stage 5 replacement. The problem was, they didn't know what happened during that stage, because the people who reached it stopped reporting completely. No calls, no messages, no follow-ups, just silence. At first, investigators assumed the worst. Disappearances, abductions. But then they noticed something unsettling. These people weren't missing. They were still there, still living their lives, still going to work, still talking to friends, still existing. On the surface, nothing had changed, but the people closest to them started noticing something else. Something small, something subtle, something deeply wrong. The case that confirmed this was one investigators still refused to talk about publicly. It was labeled Case 5, The Wife Who Wasn't. The report came from a man named Elias Turner, 41 years old, married for 12 years, 2 children. His wife Nora had always been the same. Warm, kind, predictable, the kind of person you build your life around. And for years, everything was normal. Until one night. It was. Elias woke up around 3:00 a.m. No reason, no sound, just awake. And immediately, he felt it. That same feeling reported in every other case. The awareness, like someone was watching him. He turned his head slightly and saw her, standing in the doorway. His wife, just standing there, not moving, not speaking, just watching him, in complete silence. "Nora," he whispered. No response. She didn't blink, didn't react, just stood there. Elias felt a chill run down his spine, because something about the way she stood was wrong. Too still, too perfect, like a photograph. After a few seconds, she turned and walked away, slowly, almost mechanically. Elias sat there for a long time, trying to make sense of it. Maybe she was sleepwalking. Maybe she didn't hear him. That's what he told himself. That's what he needed to believe. The next morning, everything seemed normal. Nora was in the kitchen, making breakfast, smiling, talking, exactly the way she always did. But Elias noticed something small, something no one else would have seen. She poured coffee into an empty cup. There was no mug there, just the motion, like she expected it to exist. She paused, looked down, and then slowly placed the pot back. Without saying a word, Elias didn't mention it, but something inside him started to shift. Over the next few days, more things happened. Tiny mistakes. She would call him by the wrong name. For just a second, forget simple things she had always known. Repeat phrases, slightly off, like someone trying to remember a script they hadn't fully learned yet. And then came the moment that broke everything. It was late evening. They were sitting together, watching TV. Normal, quiet, until Nora suddenly turned to him and asked a question. "Do you think I'm doing it right?" Elias frowned. "Doing what?" She stared at him, and for a split second, her expression changed. Not drastically, just enough. Enough for him to see something underneath. Something unfamiliar. Something that didn't belong to her. And then she smiled again. "Never mind," she said, like nothing had happened. That night, Elias didn't sleep. He couldn't, because deep down, he knew something horrifying. The woman in his house looked like his wife, sounded like his wife, acted like his wife, but she was. The next morning, he made a decision. He contacted investigators, told them everything, every detail, and for the first time, they didn't dismiss it, because they had heard it before. They arrived that same day, interviewed Nora, ran tests, asked questions, and according to the official report, she passed everything perfectly. No signs of distress, no inconsistencies, no abnormalities, except for one thing. When they asked her how long she had been married, she hesitated, just for a moment, before answering. 12 years. Correct, but something about the way she said it felt rehearsed. Investigators left that day with no answers. But Elias knew. He could feel it. That subtle difference, that absence, like something essential, was missing. 3 weeks later, Elias disappeared. No note, no struggle, no evidence. Gone. Nora. She stayed, continued her life, took care of the children, went to work, and according to neighbors, she seemed perfect, too perfect. When investigators returned to follow up, they found something chilling. In the bedroom, on Elias' side of the bed, a small audio recorder, still running, and when they played it back, they heard something that connected everything. A voice, Elias' voice, whispering in the dark, "Please, that's not her," followed by another voice, calm, controlled, perfectly mimicking Nora, replying, "I know." And then, silence. That recording marked the first confirmed case of stage 5. Not disappearance, replacement. By now, the truth was impossible to ignore. The echo didn't just observe, didn't just mimic. It integrated. It became. And the worst part, no one could tell the difference. Because once it reached stage 5, there were no more mistakes, no more glitches, no more signs, just perfection. And that raised a question that no one wanted to ask. How many people have already been replaced? By the time investigators confirmed stage 5, everything changed. Because up until that point, there was still a sense of control. You could leave the house, avoid the signs, ignore the feeling. But now they knew the truth. If it reached stage 5, it was already too late. The task force assigned to these cases was small, quiet, unofficial, no public announcements, no media coverage. Because how do you explain something like this? How do you tell people that something might be living their lives perfectly without anyone noticing? You don't. You observe. You document. And you hope it doesn't spread. But it already had. The final case in the file was the one that ended the investigation entirely. Not because they solved it, but because something happened that they couldn't contain. It was labeled Case 6, the recording that shouldn't exist. The subject wasn't a victim. It was an investigator, a man named Richard Vale. He had been working on the Echo cases for months, reviewing files, listening to recordings, studying patterns, and like everyone else, he believed he was observing something external, something separate, something that happened to asterisk other people. Until the night, he started hearing it himself. It began with a sound. Soft, familiar, a voice from another room, calling his name. Richard. He froze, because he lived alone. At first he ignored it, just like the others had. But that was the mistake, because ignoring it didn't stop it. Over the next few days, the pattern unfolded, exactly as documented. Objects moved, doors opened, sounds echoed through empty spaces. And then came the mimicry. One night, he received a call. Unknown number. He stared at it for a long time, because he already knew what he would hear. But he answered anyway, slowly bringing the phone to his ear. And on the other side, his own voice whispered, "You should have stopped looking." Richard didn't panic. He didn't run, because unlike the others, he understood the pattern. He knew what came next. That's when he made a decision. If this thing learned by observing, then he would do something different. He would record everything. Not just audio, not just notes. Everything. His thoughts, his movements, his environment. He set up cameras in every room, microphones in every corner, and began documenting his own descent into stage 5. What he captured was never meant to be seen. The footage begins normally. Richard sitting at his desk, explaining the situation. Calm, focused. This is no longer an external phenomenon, he says. It adapts, it learns, and I believe it needs proximity. He pauses, and I've been studying it for too long. The next clips show progression. Lights flickering, doors opening. At one point, a camera captures something impossible. Richard sitting in the living room, while another Richard walks past the hallway behind him, perfectly identical, moving naturally, like it belongs there. Days pass. The footage becomes more erratic, more unstable. Richard starts talking less, sleeping less, watching the cameras constantly, because now he's not just studying it, he's trying to find it. And then there's the final recording. The timestamp reads *3:03 a.m. The camera is positioned in his bedroom. The lights are off, but the faint glow from the hallway illuminates the room just enough. Richard is sitting on the edge of his bed, not moving, just staring at the door, waiting. And then it opens, slowly, silently. Something steps inside. At first, you can't see it clearly, just a silhouette, standing in the doorway, watching him. And then it steps forward, into the light. It's him, perfect, every detail, every feature, every movement, identical. The two versions of Richard stand there, facing each other, neither one speaking, neither one moving, until finally, one of them smiles and says, "We're ready." The other one nods. And then the camera cuts to black. That's where the official footage ends. But that's not the part that ended the investigation. Because 3 days later, Richard returned to work. He walked into the office, greeted his colleagues, sat at his desk, and continued his job like nothing had happened. No signs of distress, no memory of the incident. Perfect, at least on the surface, because one of his colleagues reported something strange. During a routine conversation, Richard paused, tilted his head slightly, and asked a question. A simple one. "Do I sound right to you?" The colleague laughed it off, said yes, of course. But Richard didn't smile. He just nodded slowly, as if confirming something. The investigation was shut down shortly after. All files sealed, all recordings archived. Officially, the echo doesn't exist. But here's the part they don't include in the reports. Some of the recordings were never recovered, and some of them are still out there, circulating, unlabeled, unidentified. Audio files, phone calls, videos. And if you ever come across one, it won't start with a scream or a warning. It will start, like all the others, silence, then a sound, a breath, and then a voice. Your voice, speaking words you haven't said yet. Because by the time you hear it, it's already listening, already learning, already becoming. And if you're very, very unlucky, it might already be you.